Lesson number 6 is how to coach versus criticize mistakes. What are we supposed to do when something goes wrong? When people have dropped the ball or made a mistake? Well, here's an example of what not to do, and then we'll talk about what we can do instead. I have a friend who's a football coach, and his high school team was tied with another high school team for the championship of their county. Whoever won this last game was going to go to the States. So it's a very dramatic situation. The score is tied. It's the fourth quarter. They're marching down the field. Their quarterback throws a perfect pass. Their best receiver, who is his son, is racing down the sidelines. Here comes the ball. And he does something he's been told 100 times never to do. What's that? Yep, he takes his eyes off the ball. He can't resist sneaking a peek behind his shoulder to see how much he beat the defender. You know what happens. The ball goes right through his hands on the ground. He feels terrible. He trudges back to the bench. My friend, the coach, is so caught up in the emotion of the game, without really thinking what he's about to say, he starts yelling at his son, "Johnny, you should have kept your eyes on the ball." He said, "You had the game in your hands. You blew it." He said, "How many times?" And he kept going until his son finally stood up and he said, "Dad, it was a mistake." He said, "I never want to play for you again." And that evening, his son got a ride home with a friend. And when he got home, he went right upstairs and he wouldn't even talk to his father. And my friend called me the next morning and told me what had happened. He said, "Sam, I know what I said didn't help." He said, "What are you supposed to say when people make stupid mistakes?" I said, "Charlie, do you know anyone who can undo the past?" Because if someone makes a mistake, if they literally or figuratively drop the ball, and we tell them what they should have done, they will resent us even if we're right. Now think about around your office. Well, you should have brought this up in the meeting. Well, you should have put that in the budget. As well, you should have talked to Bob about that. When we tell people what they should have done, it may be true, it's tactless, and they will resent us even if what we're saying is right. Sometimes, especially if what we're saying is right, because they can't undo it. That's why from now on, instead of using that destructive word should, we're going to use the constructive word next time, from now on, or in the future. Because when we talk about how they can get it right next time, instead of what they did wrong this time, now we're being a coach instead of a critic. People learn from their mistakes instead of lose face over their mistakes. And we're treating them with respect instead of treating them in a way that will create resentment. So let's think about another situation. A colleague of mine is an association director, and they were getting ready for their annual convention, and they had a new employee who was responsible for getting the hundreds of name badges. So Judy came back from lunch, and the new employee was in tears, and Judy found out what's going on. She said, "The computer system dropped all the names." And she said, "You should have left the computer on." It's, "Well, you should have talked with Carol. She knows the system. You should have told us that you didn't know how to use this." And those shoulds just tumbled out of her mouth in the moment. And now we talked afterwards, and she said, "Sam, that is going to really put us seriously behind." And I was so upset. I wasn't thinking about what I said. And that's the point of Tung Fu. It is said that most mistakes in life, most misunderstandings in communication are a result of action without thought. Tung Fu is to think before we speak so that we can say something that helps instead of hurts. So with Judy, if something like that happens again and something goes egregiously wrong and we're about right there on the tip of our tongue to tell someone what they should have done, ask ourselves, will it help? It won't, because they can't undo it. Instead, focus on from now on. If you have any questions, please leave the computer on and ask Carol for help. She's familiar with the system and she can talk you through it. I'll always remember I was speaking for YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and a gentleman emailed me after our program. He said, Sam, when I got home from the conference, he said, I came up to my house and my son had surprised me by mowing the lawn. And I was so pleased. And yet what tumbled out of my mouth? It's like, good job, son, but we've talked about that word, but you should have used, and you know what? I just saw my son's face fall. He said, from now on, I'm going to keep these words to use on our refrigerator so I can train myself to, about that time I'm going to tell someone what they should have done, instead switch to how we can keep that from happening next time, how we can handle it more effectively in the future, how they can be more responsible from now on. We're being a coach instead of a critic. People learn from their mistakes instead of lose face, and we're retreating people with the respect we all want, need, and deserve. In our next lesson, we're going to talk about how to turn orders into requests, because do you know anyone who likes to be bossed around?